The Brunali engineer's face dropped, eyes widening, alien mandibles twitching in total shock as he gazed speechless at the battered metal hull of the 500-year-old human warship, the UES Retribution. Moments earlier, the dreadnought had blasted itself away from the engineer's antimatter bomb, meant to destroy the priceless relic, the detonation barely missing the human ship's stern. "I've never seen anything like it," the engineer whispered into his comms unit, voice shaking. "After 5 centuries adrift, that hulk still flies. Not even our most advanced ships from that era could start their engines after so long in the void." The grizzled old human captain, Bruce Reyes, allowed himself a smirk behind his battered helmet visor as the status lights on the bridge consoles blinked to life one by one, ancient displays and scopes booting up, flickering with static. "All right, gang, we're in business. If we pull this off, none of us will ever need to work again," Bruce announced over shortwave. "And if those Brunali bastards board us, you put 'em down fast and hard. The Retribution's going home, even if we aren't." Reyes yanked the charging handle on his battle rifle and racked a round into the chamber, the weapon's electronic ammo counter glowing a soft blue. The sound echoed through the silent CIC, where seconds earlier, the stale air had hung heavy with 5 centuries of dust. The Retribution. She was a legend, plain and simple, the first human ship to break the light barrier, the first to draw alien blood, and Reyes would be damned before he'd let the squints turn humanity's greatest warship into scrap. The distant hiss and clang of a docking tube snapping into place reverberated down the ship's spine, and Reyes knew the Brunali were storming the hull at that very moment. Staring at his reflection in the plasteel viewports of the bridge, at the grey stubble and hard lines creasing his jaw, Reyes couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to make history, or die trying. With a crackle of static, the shortwave chirped again. It was Tarkov, Bruce's demo expert. "They've cut through the cargo bay doors. ETA 30 seconds to contact." Reyes cleared his throat, shouting back, "All right, people, you heard the man. Let's get to work." The explosion rocked the Retribution, sending Bruce and his crew tumbling. Sparks erupted from consoles, and the lights went out, plunging the ship into pitch darkness. The deep thrum of the engines sputtered and died. Even the ever-present hum of the life support cut out, leaving only eerie silence. "Shit, damage report now," Bruce barked, pulling himself up. He flicked on his helmet lamp. "Main power is offline, engines are cold, life support too," Tarkov reported, coughing. "We're dead in the void." "Like hell we are. Reroute all X power to life support. Grace and Ju, get your asses to engineering and get the backups running," Bruce ordered. "The rest of you, grab some tools. Time to earn our pay." In the weak blue glow of chemlights, the crew scrambled, tearing off panels and splicing wires. It was tense, sweaty work, trying to resurrect systems that hadn't been used in lifetimes, but bit by bit, they forced the Retribution back to life. Dim emergency lights flickered on. Stale air hissed from vents as life support restarted. "Captain, you need to see this," Grayson called over the radio. We found someone in a hidden stasis pod." Bruce sprinted through the ship, boots pounding on metal decks. When he reached Grayson's location, he skidded to a halt, not believing his eyes. There, in a cryopod crusted with ice, was a man in an ancient UEF uniform, his face gaunt and pale. Impossibly, the pod's biomonitors still pulsed weakly. "Mother of God," Bruce breathed. "That's Captain Nikolai Petrov, this ship's original CO. All records say he died when the Retribution vanished." "He ain't dead yet," Doc Halsey said, already pulling medical gear from his kit. "Help me get him out, gently now." As they carefully extracted Petrov's frail body from the pod, warning klaxons suddenly blared through the ship. On the bridge, Ju's voice crackled over the shortwave, tight with tension. "Captain, I've got multiple bogies on an intercept course. Brunali cruisers. They're charging weapons and demanding we stand down or they'll blast us to atoms." In sickbay, Captain Petrov blinked, squinting under the harsh medbay lights. He tried to sit up, but his muscles felt like jelly. He fell back onto the bed with a groan. "Easy, Captain," Doc Halsey said, putting a hand on Petrov's shoulder. You've been out for a long time." How long?" Petrov croaked, his voice rough from disuse. 500 years, give or take," Bruce said, stepping into Petrov's line of sight. "I'm Captain Bruce Reyes, current CO of the Retribution. A lot has changed." Petrov's eyes widened. 5 centuries, but the war, the Brunelli— "Still going strong," Bruce said grimly. "We're in a bit of a tight spot at the moment, to be honest." Petrov struggled to process this. The war was still raging after all this time. He shook his head, trying to clear the fog from his mind. Slowly, memories started to surface. "The Retribution," Petrov said urgently, grabbing Bruce's arm with a surprisingly strong grip for a man who'd just woken from a 5-century nap. She was special, experimental tech, an advanced FTL drive system like nothing anyone had ever seen. If the Brunali get their hands on it— Bruce's eyes widened. "Are you saying this ship could turn the tide of the war?" "In the right hands, yes," Petrov said. He tried to stand, but his legs gave out. He would have crashed to the deck if Doc Halsey hadn't caught him. "Whoa there, Captain," Halsey said, easing Petrov back onto the bed. "You're in no condition to go anywhere." Petrov waved him off impatiently. "I need to get to the bridge. I need to—" Suddenly alarms blared through the ship. Drew's voice crackled over the comms. "Captain, we've got a major problem. A Brunali dreadnought just dropped out of FTL, and it's huge. Twice our size, at least." Bruce cursed under his breath. This was the last thing they needed. "Hail them," he ordered. "Let's see what they want." The view screen flickered to life, revealing a Brunali with a face like carved granite. "I am Commander Kaid of the Brunali ship Inexorable," the alien said, his voice cold. "You are trespassing in Brunali space. Surrender your vessel immediately." Bruce straightened his spine. "This is Captain Bruce Reyes of the UES Retribution. With all due respect, Commander, you're the one trespassing. This derelict is human property, and we're not giving it up." Kaid's eyes narrowed. "Is that so? Then perhaps you'd be interested in a trade. Our scans show you have a very special passenger aboard. Captain Nikolai Petrov, I believe." In sickbay, Petrov's face drained of color. How could the Brunali know he was here? "Turn over Petrov and the Retribution schematics, and I'll let you and your crew live," Kaid said. "Refuse, and I'll blast your ship to atoms." Bruce's jaw clenched. "Go to hell," he spat. Kaid smiled coldly. "Petrov is more valuable than you know, human. He's carrying advanced nanotechnology that contains a complete record of the Retribution systems, including that experimental FTL drive you mentioned, and I will tear your ship apart piece by piece to get it." Petrov's hands shook as realization dawned. His deteriorating condition wasn't due to the stasis. It was the nanotech breaking down in his cells. "You have 1 hour to comply," Kaid said. Then the screen went dark. In the stunned silence that followed, Bruce turned to Petrov, his face grim. "Is it true?" he asked. "Do you have the schematics in your head?" Petrov nodded slowly. "I didn't know," he whispered, "but it makes sense. The nanotech was a failsafe in case the Retribution was lost, a way to preserve the data." Bruce slammed his fist against the bulkhead, making everyone jump. "Damn it!" He paced the medbay, mind racing. The Brunali were jamming their comms, so they couldn't call for help. And with the Retribution's engines still offline, they couldn't run. He was faced with an impossible choice. Turn over Petrov and betray everything he believed in, or condemn his entire crew to death. He looked at Petrov, at the determination in the old captain's eyes despite his frail body. "What do we do, Captain?" Halsey asked quietly. Bruce took a deep breath. "We fight," he said. "We fight with everything we've got." Bruce's knuckles were white as he gripped the edge of the holotable, the Brunali dreadnought looming on the display. The clock was ticking. Less than an hour until Kaid's deadline, and the Retribution was still crippled, floating dead in space. "There's no other way," Petrov said, his voice steady despite his gaunt, pale face. "We have to get me off this ship. As long as the nanotechnology is here, the Brunali won't stop hunting us." "You're talking about a one-way trip," Bruce growled, slamming his fist on the table. The hologram flickered. "I won't let you sacrifice yourself." "How you don't have a choice," Petrov snapped. He stood up straighter, a shadow of his former commanding presence. "The teleporter can send me to the Brunali ship. Once I'm there, I'll activate the nanotech's self-destruct. It'll fry their systems and destroy the data." Bruce shook his head. "It's suicide, plain and simple." "Kurt's the only way to buy you time to repair the retribution and get the crew to safety," Petrov insisted. The two men stared each other down, the weight of 5 centuries hanging between them. Finally, Bruce looked away. "Damn it all," he muttered. "All right, we'll do it your way." The next few minutes passed in a blur of activity. Doc Halsey gave Petrov a stimulant shot, enough to keep him on his feet for a little while longer. Ju and Tarkov prepped the teleporter, a hulking piece of machinery that took up half of Cargo Bay 2. It hummed to life, coils glowing an eerie blue. Bruce assembled the crew in the bay. They stood in silence, watching as Petrov shook hands with each of them in turn. "It's been an honor," Petrov said, his voice rough with emotion. "I never thought I'd have another chance to serve, to make a difference." He clasped Bruce's hand last, holding it tight. "Thank you, Captain Reyes, for everything." Bruce nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He helped Petrov into the teleporter chamber, the old captain's steps slow and pained. "Give 'em hell," Bruce said. Petrov smiled, a real smile, not the grim battle mask he'd worn for so long. "Aye, aye, Captain." The chamber door hissed shut. Ju typed in the coordinates, his fingers flying over the control panel. "Teleporter locked on target. Ready to engage on your order, Captain." Bruce took a deep breath. "Engage!" There was a blinding flash of light, a crackling surge of power. When Bruce blinked the spots from his eyes, the chamber was empty. Petrov was gone. For a moment there was only silence. Then proximity alarms blared to life once more. "Captain, the Brunali ship. Something's happening," Tarkov reported, his eyes glued to the sensor display. "Their power levels are fluctuating wildly. Shields are down, weapons offline." Bruce was already moving, sprinting for the bridge. "Ju, divert everything we've got to the main gun. This is our shot." The crew scrambled to their stations. Emergency lights flickered as power surged through damaged conduits. On the view screen, the Brunali dreadnought loomed, its hull pulsing with erratic energy spikes. "Main gun charging," Ju called out. 60%, 70, 80... "Fire!" Bruce roared. The Retribution shuddered as the massive cannon unleashed a lance of pure energy. It punched through the Brunali ship's hull like it was made of paper, blasting a molten hole straight through the core. On the Brunali bridge, Cade howled in fury as consoles exploded around him, showering the deck with sparks. Alarms blared, the lights flickering madly. "What's happening?" he demanded, gripping the arms of his command chair. "Where's Petrov?" "He's not here," one of the Brunali officers reported, frantically working his controls. "But our systems are shutting down. Engines, weapons, life support, it's all gone." Cade's eyes widened in realization. "It was a trick," he snarled. "The nanotechnology, it was a virus. A damned human virus." Deep in the bowels of the Brunali ship, in a dimly lit chamber filled with pulsing alien machinery, Petrov smiled. He could feel the nanotech spreading through the ship, corrupting every system it touched. With a shaking hand, he reached out and placed his palm on the main reactor control panel. "This is for the Retribution," he whispered, "for Earth." He closed his eyes and activated the self-destruct. The explosion was blinding, a miniature sun blooming in the void. The Brunali dreadnought vanished in a maelstrom of fire and debris, the shockwaves slamming into the Retribution like a hammer blow. On the bridge, Bruce and his crew clung to their stations as the ship rocked violently. Sparks rained down from overloaded consoles, the air thick with the stench of burning insulation. "Damage report!" Bruce shouted over the chaos. Hull breaches on decks 4 and 5, Tarkov reported, his voice tight. Emergency force fields are holding, but barely. Main power is failing. We're running on fumes here, Captain. Bruce's heart sank as he stared at the readouts. The Retribution was dying, her ancient systems pushed beyond their limits, and their distress call to Earth had gone unanswered, lost in the void. Suddenly, Ju's console lit up with a proximity alert. Captain, I'm picking up multiple warp signatures, closing fast. For a moment, Bruce dared to hope, but the sensor data scrolling across the screen confirmed his worst fears. The energy profiles were Brunali, a whole pack of cruisers bearing down on their position. They were out of time and out of options. Bruce closed his eyes for a moment, the weight of command heavy on his shoulders. When he opened them again, his gaze was steel. "Abandon ship," he ordered, his voice steady. "All hands abandon ship. Get to the life pods." The crew hesitated, disbelief and defiance etched on their faces. But Bruce met each of their gazes in turn, unwavering. "That's an order," he said softly. "Go now." One by one they filed out, heading for the escape pods. Bruce watched them go, pride and sorrow warring in his chest. They were a good crew, the best. When the last of them had gone, Bruce turned back to the console. The Brunali ships were closing in, their weapons charging. They'd be in firing range in minutes. But they wouldn't get the Retribution. Bruce would make damn sure of that. His fingers flew over the controls, inputting the self-destruct sequence. The ship's reactor would overload, reducing the Retribution to atoms. The Brunali would get nothing, no wreckage, no salvage, no secrets left to plunder. As the countdown began, Bruce looked out at the stars one last time. He thought of Petrov, of the sacrifice he'd made, a sacrifice that would be remembered, that would mean something. "See you on the other side, Captain," Bruce murmured. Then he sat back in the command chair, watching the numbers tick down to 0, and waited for the end. The Retribution shook violently as Bruce slammed his fist on the self-destruct button, red lights flashing across the console. Klaxons screamed through the ship, a countdown to oblivion. Suddenly, Ju shouted over the blaring alarms. "Captain, long-range sensors just came online. I'm picking up a massive energy signature dropping out of FTL." Bruce's eyes shot to the display. A cluster of friendly IFF tags blinked into existence. His heart leapt. It was the cavalry, a full human battle group led by the carrier UES Resilience. They'd gotten the distress call after all. The human ships tore into the approaching Brunali force with a vengeance, missiles and railgun slugs shredding alien hulls. The Brunali attack faltered as the reinforcements cut into their formation. Bruce saw his chance, a glimmer of hope. He overrode the self-destruct with frantic keystrokes. "Divert everything we've got left to the engines," he barked. "Get us to the fleet." The Retribution lurched forward, maneuvering thrusters firing in desperate staccato bursts. She was a wounded beast, fighting for life. But the Brunali weren't done. A frigate, sleek and deadly, broke through the battle line, accelerating towards the Retribution. Bruce watched helplessly as its weapons glowed with charge. The dreadnought's shields were depleted, unable to take another hit. Bruce braced for the end, but it never came. At the last instant, a human destroyer, trailing debris and venting atmosphere, threw itself into the frigate's path. It was the UES Horatius, interposing its ravaged hull between the Retribution and certain destruction. The Brunali weapons discharged in a blinding flash. The Horatius vanished in a corona of nuclear fire, a pyre of vaporized metal. The shockwaves slammed into the Retribution, nearly throwing Bruce from his seat. But they were alive. Against all odds, they'd made it. The Retribution limped into the protective envelope of the human fleet, its escorts forming a protective ring. Bruce slumped in his chair, adrenaline and despair warring within him. A message blinked on the comm panel. It was the captain of the Resilience. Bruce hit the accept key, expecting congratulations or orders. Instead, a stony-faced officer filled the screen, his eyes hard with grief and accusation. "The Horatius. She was commanded by your son, David. He sacrificed himself for you, you stubborn old fool. Bruce reeled as if physically struck. David, the son he'd pushed away, whose childhood he'd missed in pursuit of glory. David, who died to save him. The weight of it hit Bruce like a hammer blow. He'd finally achieved his dream, but the cost was too high. Bruce wept then, tears streaming down his weathered face. On the view screen the battle raged, human and Brunali ships twisting and dying in the void. But Bruce saw none of it. He saw only the faces of the lost. Petrov, David, the countless others sacrificed on the altar of his ambition. No more, he vowed silently, no more. The retribution would fly again, her secrets unlocked for the good of all. He would see to it, dedicate his life to it. Not for glory or greed, but for them, for the fallen. The road ahead would be long. The war was far from over. But for the first time in centuries there was a flicker of hope. A chance for a future beyond the bloodshed. And the retribution would light the way. If you finish this story, please subscribe and like the video. Then leave a comment that says, "I liked the story," and I will heart every single one of them. It really helps me. Thank you for your time.